All right, let's talk about fuel. Fuels. All right, talk about some terms for fuel. One, volatility. You know, in the past, some of these terms didn't really matter. I mean, they mattered, but as a technician on the line, you had one flavor of fuel, and that was it, 100 low lead. And so you get what you get. But now, with light sport being so prevalent, Rotax, they don't like 100 low lead. Well, nothing likes 100 low lead. Let me tell you that right now. We have 100 low lead. Rotax would rather not. In fact, they have whole different maintenance schedules if you want to use 100 low lead. So we've got that. Airplanes running on then auto gas. We've got the new G100 UL with no lead. Is it G100 UL? Yeah. No leaded. Swift fuel with their. Do we have Swift fuel around here? Everybody's talking about Swift fuel in Florida. I'm like, what the hell is that?
That's east.
Okay, thank you, because I'm like, I'm kind of stupid here, because I never heard of it, but it's basically 100 low lead without the lead. And so it's a lower octane rating fuel. So there's all these different kind of fuels that you're going to be responsible to know, although it's the pilot's choice what they're going to use, and it's not a difficult choice, but you'll be asked these questions. You know, hey, what should I be doing? If I do this, do I do that? You know, and so there's some terms that are really going to help you understand how to make these choices. You know, for example, lead is bad. No engine likes lead. It just creates more problems. It creates problems all across the board. The engine doesn't like it. Our oils don't like it. Our environment doesn't like it. I'm not an environmentalist, but it's just bad stuff. So then, why not run car gas? You know, it's unleaded. You get rid of the lead. It's much cleaner, but you run into problems with it's not stable. The volatility's different. So then you understand these things. Do you guys run MoGas? You can't, Tom, because you have the higher compression.
No, I think with the Grumman's, we have a lot of fuel tank inspection seals.
Oh, okay.
The theory, I don't know if anybody is qualified with the theory is that MoGas causes those leaks.
Yeah, and they're always changing those blends a little bit, and I can't. I have high compression, so I'm stuck with 100 low lead. So anyway, volatility. It's gasoline's tendency to vaporize. So gas. I'm going to write gasoline one time, then I'm going to write gasoline after that. Gas's tendency to vaporize. Right, we don't want liquid fuel in the combustion chamber. We want it to vaporize. That's when it burns. It's technically, if you had a bucket of fuel, and if you could get past the vapors on top, you could take a match and snuff it out in the fuel. You can do that with diesel. Diesel will put a match out. Somebody's car is being stolen. No. So we want it to vaporize, but we don't want it to vaporize too much. Because if it vaporizes, turns to, I hate that because we call it a gas, but it's not a gas, but it turns to a gaseous state, meaning not liquid. That's what we want, but if it does it at the wrong time in the fuel lines, then it can cause a bubble that creates fuel that won't flow past the bubble. We call that vapor lock. So if you get a vapor lock, then that's the same thing as plugging a fuel line. Well, you plug a fuel line, and that's you don't get any fuel to the carburetor, and then the engine quits running, which the good news is when the engine quits running, it tends to cool off, and that cools the fuel line, and then eventually it'll start running again if you have enough time. So hopefully. We also have to consider altitude. So volatility, definitely altitude plays a role in that. The higher up we go in the altitude with less pressure, fuel will tend to vaporize faster. And so if we have vaporizing in a fuel line that's causing a vapor lock, that would be really, really bad. So I want some, but not too much. So Let's see, it's important because, let me see, volatility is important because we'll start there. Liquids and solids don't burn. It's only the vapors burn. Which is kind of a weird statement. I read that and I'm like, wait a minute. What about paper? If I light a paper on fire, tell me the paper doesn't burn? And their point was, well, really it's vaporizing and it's the vapors coming out the paper that burn. I'm like, ah, okay, you say so. If it's too volatile, if it is too volatile, then the fuel boils. Then the fuel will boil. Well, literally it does. It starts creating bubbles and it boils off, and that creates vapor pockets. Creates vapor pockets. In fuel lines. And this is known as vapor lock. I don't think vapor lock really happens anymore. You know, modern design and stuff. But in older cars, it happened all the time, didn't it? Run a fuel line too close to an exhaust, sharp bends, runs that tended to go uphill at a bend, I think did it. You hear crazy stories about, oh yeah, you just got to put like some clothespins and stuff on it. The wooden ones? Didn't seem like that would work, but
That was the rumor.
yeah. If a wooden clothespin on, I'm like, I don't know about wood being a conductor of heat, but okay. Or worse, loss of fuel through vents. Hey, it really sucks to spend $7.50 for a gallon of avgas, watch it vaporize the week it's sitting in the hangar. So, all right, so volatility, is it good or bad? Well, too much is bad. Not enough is bad. So if it is not volatile enough, then fuel doesn't vaporize at all and it won't burn. Worst case scenario, not worst case, certainly it becomes very hard fuel to start the aircraft on when it's cold. So it's got to have, oh, I actually wrote that, yay for me. So good volatility will be volatile enough to start a cold engine, but not so volatile, but not so volatile as to have vapor lock. Vapor lock. All right, so vapor lock is a condition that occurs when fuel turns to vapor in the fuel system. So vapor lock is a condition where fuel turns to vapor. Oops. In the fuel lines. This can block fuel from flowing. Also, fuel systems do not like air bubbles in them. They do not. So we got to keep that from happening. Vapor lock is caused by, well, you know one of them. It is fuel that is too volatile. But where outside the fuel, the factors that cause it would be low pressures. Low pressure in the fuel line is what I'm referring to. And where are we going to find low pressures predominantly?
High altitude.
When we go up. So high altitude. So that becomes a problem with gravity-fed systems. Like any carbureted high-wing aircraft is just gravity. There's no fuel pump in my aircraft. It just flows from gravity from the top, from the wing, down fuel lines into the carburetor. Higher I go, the greater the chance I'm going to get vapor lock in those lines. If I have a fuel-injected system or a low-wing aircraft that uses fuel pumps, when you use the fuel pump, you're actually introducing pressure into the line, which then overcomes the low pressure and helps keep it from vapor lock, which is one of the things. There were carburetors, then they went to pressure carburetors. And that was one of the great things about pressure carburetors is they have to run under pressure. So you're running 9 to 14 or so PSI, which stops the vapor lock. But those things really hate bubbles, so you get rid of the bubbles. Low pressure, heat, and sharp bends in fuel line. One place, now that I think about it, where they claim that vapor lock happens a lot. I don't really know if this is the technical or the true definition of vapor lock, but fuel injected engines for aviation, because the fuel injectors are on top of the cylinders, and so they run from the servo unit up to the top of the engine, a manifold, spider if you will, that has lines going out to all the cylinders. And those little lines then, so the manifold sits on top of the engine right in the middle, and those lines run from the middle out across the case, across the cylinders, the barrel, the head, nice 90-degree bend, right down into the cylinder. So you've got these stainless steel lines sitting right on top of the engine. And so fuel-injected engines, when they're operating, it's fine because everything's under pressure. But you shut down the engine, go into the restaurant to have your burger, now all that heat is rising up and heat soaking everything up in there. Those injector lines get really hot, and there's nothing to block the fuel. And you can actually, if you go up to an engine that's just shut down, you can hear them tink, 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 the metal kind of contracting. But if you listen real carefully, you can hear the injectors hissing off. And that's just all the fuel in there turning to vapor, expanding and popping off in each little cylinder. And so when you start it, then you have to flood the engine with enough fuel through the whole system to purge those lines out, which then risks putting too much fuel in the engine. Now you got a flooded engine start. So fuel injected engines are cantankerous at best. Until they're running, then they're wonderful. This I think I can maybe skim a little bit. I think I'm a little too heavy in here. So latent heat of vaporization. So that is the amount of heat necessary to vaporize a given amount of fuel, which is, I'll write that, then I'll tell you the amount of heat needed to vaporize. Needed.
Hey Kevin,
Yeah.
is that latent heat of vaporization or at vaporization?
Of needed to VAPORI vaporize a given amount of fuel. All right, in order for fuel to vaporize, it has to give off some of its heat. And if it's give off heat, it has to absorb some heat. That's a better way to say it. And so if it is absorbing some heat, that means something else got cold. It gave up its heat for that to happen. So if that thing that's giving up its heat is always going to be the carburetor or that system right there. So if we're going to talk about carburetors, then what happens is the parts in the carburetor get very cold because they're giving off the heat to the fuel, so the fuel vaporizes, or to say when the fuel vaporizes, it does that. So carburetors are going to get really cold, and they're prone to icing. And so for that reason, we have to have carburetor heaters on aircraft, which is nothing more than hot air injected into the carburetor. It's not an electric thing or anything else. So we'll talk more about carburetor heaters, but we do have to realize that we do have to give off some heat in order for the fuel to vaporize. And I don't think I have to, let me see, anything else on that? Yeah, that's enough. I don't need to write a bunch of stuff about that. Just keep that in mind. Why does a carburetor get cold? Because number one, it's giving off heat to vaporize the fuel. Number two, it's under a low pressure. So it's going to be fun, and I've done this before. It's a ground power unit, GPU. You guys will be running a lot. You'll take your carburetor, disassemble, clean, inspect, put it all back together. You go out this engine, you're going to put it on, you're going to run this engine. And it's got a very long metal pipe that goes from the carburetor. It takes the carburetor and puts it out so it drips right on the hot exhaust, which is just a wonderful feature of this machine. And but it's got a long metal pipe, and some of you won't remember I said this. I'm like, touch the pipe. I'm like, whoa, touch that. And you were like, ooh, oh, wait a minute. The thing is ice cold. Yeah, it's turning to ice. Ice is actually forming, and it's like dripping wet from ice on it. So the intakes get really cold on these engines. Let's see. Vapor pressure. Vapor pressure kind of circles back around to its volatility. And it was interesting. I always love coming back from school because I've got all these thoughts in my head. It was one of the things in the road tax school, man, they got into vapor pressure of fuel. And it's like, I tell my students about vapor pressure, they'll know exactly what it is. And he even mentioned all this stuff, and I actually I'm like, yeah, I know where he's going with this. He's going to say a bomb in a second, and he did. He said bomb. So, and then I went through TSA. Don't talk about that at TSA. They don't have it. So vapor pressure. It is the pressure given off by fuel as it vaporizes in a sealed container. Take a sealed container of gasoline, torch on there, the little pressure gauge, and as you heat it up to a certain amount, that fuel is going to expand, and you get a vapor pressure off of it. I don't recommend doing it, but so that's what that is. So it's pressure given off, by a sealed amount of gasoline. And you use a bomb, a reed. I think it's RE. Oh, I think I have a picture. It's like it's a reed vapor pressure bomb is what it's called. There you go. Vapor. No, it doesn't have the word reed, but it's a reed. So you put some fuel in there, heat it up. I guess they call that the bomb part. And you see what kind of pressure you get. And so, because there's all these different blends of fuels out there, especially when you're talking about automotive fuels and you're using them in aviation, you have parameters. It has to have a certain vapor pressure or it's not a fuel that you want to use. So let's see. The higher the vapor pressure, which one's more likely to give me a problem with vapor lock? A fuel that gives me a high vapor pressure or a low vapor pressure? Why high?
Restricted fuel.
Directly related to volatility. Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. That's why I asked you. So, because I couldn't. So, if you have fuel and it gives off a high pressure, it means it's because it turned into a gaseous state more than one with a low, if that makes sense, hopefully. And so you have it turned into a lot of gas. A lot of gas means it had to fill up that chamber. filling up that chamber with pressure, cause the gauge to go higher. Higher vapor pressure means more volatility, means greater chance of vapor lock. Turn it around. Have a very low read vapor pressure, lower than it should be. If it's too low, what are we going to run into? Won't vaporize. If it doesn't vaporize, then we have problems. Starting especially. Running. Yeah, can do that. So read vapor pressure bomb. Read vapor pressure bomb. Let me see. Oh, I do have some numbers here. So avgas. So when I say avgas, pretty much just, it's 100 low lead. That's really what we have these days. Oh, now the unleaded stuff. But avgas is 5.5 to 7.0 psi. I will not ask you to remember that. At 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, it's just the number they get. Talk about octane rating. And I'm trying to remember if this slide is correct for California. I don't think it is. What's our lowest?
87.
Yeah, so this isn't Cal. No, and then I took one in Florida. I had to stop and get.
93.
I'm like, oh, check that out. It's totally different. Let me see. No, first picture. 88, 87, 89, and 93. Those are my choices at the wherever I was in Florida. Yeah, it was $3. Yeah, we had 88, 87, 89, and 93. We have 87, 89, and 91 here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 88, by the way, is that was their oh, what do you call it? Ethanol?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was ethanol.
We have,
I thought that's the year.
No,
we
it's
have the 85 out here.
It's
if you
not
can find
everywhere.
it.
It's not saying you have to find 85 around here.
Talking about me?
Yeah. Very few places run. It's the less It's recent.
all right. Vapor pressure. Yeah, we can spend a little bit of time here about octane rating. They try and make it confusing, but it's really not a confusing thing. Octane rating is simply the fuel's anti-knock capability, or anti-knock characteristics, if you will. So an expression of the fuel's anti-detonation characteristics. So, there's still a lot of people out there who they buy a car and they're like, oh, this is my baby. It only gets the best fuel. I only use the premium. And of course, you look on the gas cap and it says minimum octane rating 87. No, it always gets to 91. They doing any favors for their engine? Nope, just throwing money away. Because the engine has low compression, so it's not likely to detonate. So it was designed to run on fuel that doesn't have detonation properties, if you will. It does, but not the high ones. All right, you go buy, you have a Subaru.
I've also got a V8 Nissan Titan at home. So
Okay, what's the Titan run? I thought you had one that ran high octane or something.
It's supposed to be run on the higher octane. It says it on the booklet, but I doubt it.
I don't know what Porsche had. Only one ratio on it, so I can't remember.
Okay, so it's Porsche, all Mercedes that I'm aware of, unless it's diesel. BMWs.
BMW's the same example.
Yeah, all your European cars, I think, are all high octane because they run high compression pistons. And if you run the low octane, you're going to get detonation. Now, thankfully in cars, they have a knock sensor, it's all cars, that's listening for that knock. And when they hear the knock, what it's going to do is it's going to send a signal to the computer, and the computer is going to back off on the timing. It's going to retard the timing, and you'll lose some of the power. So I suppose with modern electronics, you'll be fine with whatever you're going to run. You're just losing some of your horsepower. Although I've heard people say, that's not true. I put 1 tank of cheap gas in my Mercedes and it ruined the engine. I'm like, yeah, I don't think so either. So, all right. So running higher octane than you need is not doing you any favors. Now, if you want my opinion, running Arco gas versus Chevron, that was a big deal. Should I pick on Arco? I don't know.
On your wallet, yeah.
So do you know there's a difference between PG&E and SoCal Edison with the Tesla?
Oh, yeah.
Now, what electricity is better?
Yes. Oh, man.
Do you get cleaner electricity?
Whatever comes out of the free charging station is the one I like. All right. So the octane rating, that's just an expression of the anti-detonation properties. When I got into aviation, we had 2 types of fuels. 8087, that's one thing, and 100 low lead. And so you would simply look at, your airplane is placarded for the minimum fuel rating. If you had a high compression engine, then you would be running the 100 low lead. If you had a low compression engine, you'd buy the 8087. But they got rid of the 8087 because they wanted to go with 100 low lead. And as I will point out in a minute, 100 low lead is a misnomer. It is low lead compared to what we used to use.
But it's so high.
It is so high. It's like 12 times the amount of lead ever put in car gas. So if you compared this to old-timey leaded car gas, we would call it 100 ultra lead, ultra super extra lead.
And wasn't straight 100 even worse?
Oh yeah,
Green
yeah,
100.
yeah. Yep. Okay. So, all right. So where do they get this from? All right, this anti-detonation, and this is where I can really get off in the weeds, and there's no reason for me to. So I'm just not going to write all this stuff, but I will tell you because I think it's rather interesting. And what they do is they take test engines that are highly censored, and they will run the fuel in there and compare it to something. So, for example, they have the iso-octane. I'll write some of these things I'm talking about. So iso-octane, ISO octane. It's a type of gas. And if you ran this test engine on pure iso-octane, and I should back up and say gasoline is not a thing. It's a huge mixture of things. And you know that because we have our winter blends, we have our summer blends, we've got, top tier gasoline, you got gasoline with Tektron, you got, it's a chemistry, right? And but anyway, you take pure iso-octane. Now what happens, I don't know why we can't just run pure iso-octane. It might just, cause all the whales to die or something. But if you take pure iso-octane and you run this test engine, you're going to come up with this rating of 100. So iso-octane, they say, okay, we run pure iso-octane. They try and get the engine to detonate. They find the characteristics and they labeled that 100. Then they took and they did the same thing and they used this stuff called normal heptane. And it's another type of gas, and it has a rating of 0. It's like really good gas, but it just knocks real easy or something. I don't know. That killed all the baby seals, right? So one kills whales, one kills seals. So we want to kill them in, proportion. I'm just making all that up, right? So they get these ratings, and then you take a sample of fuel. The Chevron comes in with a bucket of fuel. See what you got here, and they pour it in a little thing, and they take the test engine, they kind of figure it out, and they say, okay, well, your fuel was kind of like running it on a mixture of like 91% iso-octane with 9% normal heptane. So there we go. Well, if it's a 91% blend of this iso-octane, then we'd call it 91. If I think I got the numbers right. I kept maybe switching them. Yes, you get the point. So if it's like 91% isooctane, then it gets this knock rating of 91. Let me see. So, but there's slightly different ways they did it. One way they did it was the RON method, they called it, research octane number, which is the most common type of octane rating. The research octane number. That's not important, but if you want to write it, research. So let's see, determined by running the fuel and test engine with variable compression under different controlled conditions, comparing results with those mixtures of isooctane and normal heptane, which is what I just said. And the test fuel matches the performance of, yeah, that's everything I just said before. So, you know, if it's 80% isooctane, 20% normal heptane, then we give the fuel a rating of 80, right? So there was RON. Well, you know, you can't just have one thing, so somebody else came up with another way. They have the MON. They have RON and MON. So MON is the motor octane number, and it is a little more complicated. It's like a whole paragraph. They ran the engine at certain RPMs and preheat the fuel, do a bunch of other stuff. Anyway, it's a whole other way of doing this. So you have two different ways of doing it. So a thing I read said, by the way, aviation is closely more to the MON stuff. But I tell you all this to tell you that it is how they do it. And have you ever noticed that right there?
Octane rating?
Minimum octane rating is the R plus N divided by 2 method. It's on every gas pump you'll ever go to. So what are they saying?
Disclaimer, it's the wrong method, and then they divide it by 2.
RON plus MON
Mon.
divided by 2 equal method. They average the two.
Average it.
Okay,
Gotcha.
now I tell you that, and that's normally where I stop. But then I saw this. Let me see.
Let's go deep.
Oh, just for fun here. We'll keep that. Let me see. Wait a minute. Can we do this? I don't know if it's connected. Oh, come on. Seriously, it's on my phone. I went to Boston. Went to the... All right, very sad.
Draw a picture.
I will. It's not a big deal. I already oversold it. Slideshow. Current slide. All right. When I was filling up the car in Florida, and they had the 88 right there. The 80, no. Oh, yeah.
They only need one method.
Yeah, it's different. It is here, R plus M, unless they just misprinted it, 2.
Multiplied it.
So they multiplied it by 2?
I think that's a misprint.
Ah, it's right there.
Oh, well, I mean, it looks like. Oh man, I get it.
I was like, what?
Well, it is Florida.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
The low
this
bid-
is the weirdest thing that's come out of Florida. Come on.
That's the low bid supplier of the sign.
Yeah.
What's that?
The low bid supplier of the sign.
Yeah, it was.
That means really cheap. It's exciting.
Oh, I feel that dash. It's $100.
Okay, so that's how we get all that. And that just saved me a whole bunch of time.
Yeah,
So,
cheaper.
all right, let's talk about avgas now. Avgas. When I was a mechanic examiner, one of my practical projects was that you had to identify certain fuels. And so I had some baby food jars, and one of the baby food jars had some red liquid in it, one had some green liquid in it, one had some blue liquid in it. And you had to identify those fuels. Well, I don't think they'll do that anymore since most of the stuff doesn't exist, but, you know, we'll just talk about it a little bit because these aircraft that you're working on, if you're working on general aviation, they were all certified for these types of fuels. So when you look at it, like, what the hell? Well, you got to know what they're talking about there. So we had red, which was 8087. I told you that's one thing. That's what we called it. It wasn't 80, and it wasn't 87. It was 8087. And so the 8087 indicates what?
It's octane.
Octane. So we don't really call it octane though in aviation. It's the performance number. So the 8087 is
Yeah.
performance number, which is the anti-knock characteristics, which is basically your octane rating, if you will. So what that meant, at lean, it was an 80 at lean. We'll talk more about lean and rich. 87 when it was rich. And by the way, it contained about 0.5 milliliters of lead per gallon.
Is that all just based off of airflow? How they're getting that 80 and 87? Or
No,
is
you as the
airflow-
pilot have control of the mixture knob.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk a lot about mixtures.
Oh, okay. I see what you're
So just remember, rich and lean. If it's lean, it means that you have more air than fuel from, and I'll write all this down, but it's called stoichiometric, is the term that is used for a chemically pure burn. So it's a guy in a lab going, okay, this molecule goes to this one and this one, this one, and how many of these do you need of that? It's not in reality, so that's going to be an important point. But stoichiometric is a perfect mixture, and so we take stoichiometric, which is a perfect amount of fuel and air to make a perfect blend, a burn. Well, if we take away some of the fuel, it still burns, it's just lean, and so we'll have some leftover air. We go to rich, still burns, but we have some leftover fuel because we ran out of oxygen. So that was red. So that's a big deal. 8087 was red. It was red. Then we had, and I don't think I've ever seen this stuff, purple. And I'm not even sure, it might even still be out there because we do have some military aircraft out there. They got to be doing something. Do you think? I don't know. It's
I just remember back that there was Martin stations, and that was kind of a branding thing. They had purple fuel and purple oil.
Yeah, that's right.
But that was
oh,
40 years ago.
speaking of red, if you were to dip a fuel tank today and come up with a sample of red fuel, what is that today? Non-taxed diesel. Yeah.
DOT would have a field day.
Uh-huh. Well, unless it's in a tractor. So, but yeah, so red fuel's still out there. It's diesel. Do not put that in your airplane.
What's it called?
Air tractor.
Air tractor? Play
You-
on words.
You would not want that in your air tractor. It will destroy the engine. Okay, so that was military and race planes. So 115, 145, what's the low number mean? Lean. The high number is going to be rich. I don't have to write all this down. Rare to find was common when military used piston aircraft. Like I said, I think it's still possibly out there. I couldn't even imagine. I could imagine, but I wouldn't know how accurate it'd be, what it costs these days. Only a few aircraft are actually certified on this because you didn't certify military aircraft. What's that?
What do they use at Reno?
I don't know. I was thinking this as I'm talking. Next year, nothing apparently.
Yeah.
Oh, they're not doing it anymore?
Nope, it's last year. Yeah, if you've never been to the Reno air races,
Dying up there.
you gotta go. It's
Too many people flying.
yeah, it's not even like it used to be, because people are dying. Okay, 4.6
Now everyone says that.
milliliters of lead.
Go or not?
So we went from 0.5, 0.5 for that 8087 to 4.6 milliliters of lead. Then we had green. Again, something I've never seen, which was just 100. And they said it's actually 100/130 was more of the line. But they, at that point, you know, it's cheaper to print just 100. Let's call it 100. Let me see. No lead limit. Yeah, use whatever you wanted, but usually about 3 milliliters of lead per gallon.
When you say milliliters, is that like tetraethyl?
And then we've got the blue. And if you've never seen a gallon of 100 low lead, it is really the most spectacularly beautiful blue you've ever seen. When you see a bucket of that, like in a white bucket, you're like, wow, it looks refreshing. You just want to dive into it. I mean, it really looks, you know, it's what I want my pool to look like. It will burn the hell out of you even when it's not lit on fire. I got burned pretty bad by that stuff. Soaked into my shirt and t-shirt, and I didn't take it off, and it was like, ugh. Look, I got a horrible sunburn. Blue, which is 100 low lead. They say it's still, they call it 100, 130, you know, behind the scenes. I read one thing that says really it's more like 104, 130. I'm like, whatever. Okay, so it's 100 low lead. Remember, and now low lead, so LL or low lead is relative to what it used to be. It has about 2.12 grams of lead. Now I want to switch to grams for some reason. Grams of lead. Leaded autogas had as much as 2.2, so it's equivalent to our highest leaded fuel, although I don't think that, something that I wrote doesn't sound right. I redid my notes. Yeah, I'd written at one point, in 1970 we had 0.19 milliliter per gallon. So that's, I knew that was a misprint. It's not that. So it'd be 0.2. So let me see, let me fix that here. I think that's right. It'd be 10 times. So our leaded car gas was 0.2. I have to look that up maybe. Yeah. I thought I did that on my notes, which is weird. No. Okay. So anymore, all I know for a fact is you're going to get blue, 100 low lead. That's our avgas. Maybe you can get some of the purple. They don't make the green. They don't make the red. It just isn't going to happen. So you can see it is low lead, well, although the 8087 was low lead. So why did they stop making 8087? I believe it was just a economic issue. When you read about why we don't have unleaded and the price of our gas and all that kind of stuff, it always circles back around to there just isn't a big demand for aviation fuel, and because the demand is so low, they can't make money selling it, so they don't want to have two different types. You just want one, so you get one.
It said 1 milliliter is equal to 1 gram, so
Same thing.
yeah.
Okay,
0.2.
so I could just change that to milliliters, and that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so tetraethyl lead is a gram and a half per milliliter.
Okay, so
Because of the
1.6.
density.
we'll just call it milliliters and call it a day. Okay. At some point I came up with the fact that there is some sort of 82 UL, which might be that Swift stuff I was talking about. I've never seen it. I don't know where you get it. And they do purple. So it's a low octane grade for low compression engines, obviously, because that's what it takes. Let's see, higher vapor pressure. It can be manufactured from motor gasoline, particularly applicable to those craft STCs use automotive gasoline, which we'll talk about in a minute. So, like I said, I've never seen it, don't know. Just heard about this Swift stuff this last week. I haven't even really looked it up. But I'm told that Swift gas, which is a East Coast thing, is nothing more than 100 low lead without the lead. And now we're going to have G100UL. And I saw a picture of it, and they said, oh, look, it's green. And they said, it is orange. Orange or amber in color.
Oh, great, we're gonna be mixing up the jet fuel now.
Just
can't be blue.
It's on the STC. It's gonna be blue-green.
Blue-green, okay.
Pretty close to that, you're saying that existing 100 low lead, they're also calling blue-green, which is kind of fun.
I got this right off of their website. The GAMI's website. But they did show that picture of it and said when mixed with 100 low lead, it will be blue-green.
Mm.
Okay, I'll go back and reread.
Yeah. So we'll go with this for now, but they said when mixed with low lead, it would be a blue-green. Let me see.
Fantastic.
Well, the very first thing up top,
Gotcha.
you even said something about corrected.
Yeah, the other thing you do is when you read the stuff that's online, some of it's a little older and they say it's gonna be some kind of amber color.
So this is their official website. So let me
Yeah.
see. G100 UL.
What we really mean
There you go. Amber or that's green. Let me see.
That or they're really loose with the descriptions.
What's that?
They're really loose with the
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna be a color.
It's got a color. Some color.
It's a mystery color.
typically color. Yeah, go back up.
Huh? Where?
Keep going.
Oh, what is the color? Typically has orange or amber color. That's exactly where I got this. When mixed with 50-50 with blue 100, the color is green and similar to the color of earlier 100 green. So that's what I got for now. That's exactly where I got it. Thank you. All right, so we'll call it orange or amber in color or green. That's what the G stands for. Green 100. No, it doesn't. It stands for GAMI. But, all right. Of course, since we're talking about it, you are going to have an STC, which is supplement to the type certificate. Because when you look at the type certificate for my airplane, it says right on there, minimum octane rating, 100 low lead or something like that, 100. And so you have to have a supplement to type certificates. You have to buy paperwork in order to use this fuel. I looked up the price. For me, it'd be $500 for my aircraft because it goes by horsepower and stuff. So my 182. It is approved for all piston engines, weighs slightly more than the 100 low lead at 6.3 pounds per gallon at the same volumetric gallons per hour fuel flow. Let me see. This is just a note. I thought it was cool. At the same volumetric, gallons per hour, fuel flow, and running a little bit lean of peak, which we'll talk about, the aircraft will be 1 or maybe 2 knots faster due to a slightly higher volumetric energy density. Likewise, with full tanks, the range of the aircraft will be the same or possibly increased by 1%.
So what are they changing exactly with that?
No lead.
Okay.
Yep.
So if they're mixing it, you're just getting a lower light quantity.
If you're mixing
Because
it, you
they
get
said
the
you
lead
can
back.
mix it, they're doing 50-50 mix
Oh,
on the website.
no, if you
I think
mix
they
it.
say arbitrarily. In other words, if you have half the tank of
And you
lead,
decide to start
you can
now
just
putting
add
this
this
in.
stuff to it.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So when I went to Lycoming school, one of the guys in the class was a shell engineer. And he was there because they had Lycoming. They were testing the shell gases, trying to make their unleaded. It was interesting talking to him. He said, you can't just go out and make this fuel. He said, you make it, but then you have to test it with every conceivable combination of every other fuel a pilot could ever conceivably get for their airplane. So you have to use, the G100 UL with this much low lead, 100 low lead, then this much, and this much, and you just got to, and so then you have to do it with all the car gases, which, even if you're not supposed to have it, you could have it because they're liable for what happens if you mix the two. Yep. We're over here. All right, weight of fuel. So while we're on this subject, it is something that you need to commit to memory. weight of fuel at 6 pounds per gallon. I seriously doubt the FAA will ever change their test question based on the 100 UL at 6.2 or 3 pounds per gallon. I don't see it happening. All right, lead in fuel. You want to start a fight in aviation, you start talking about lead and running lean. I've seen some people get pretty angry and about come to blows over some of this stuff. So when we talk about this stuff, it is, I guess that's to say it's somewhat controversial. Everybody has an opinion. I'm going to give you mine, let you make up your own. So in order to get the octane rating up in our fuels, because right, you go to the store right now and you get premium, you're going to get what, 91? Okay, we got to get it up to 100. And if we don't, we're going to have detonation in the aircraft engine. We get detonation, we can't hear it, so we can't control it because the propeller makes too damn much noise, and we don't have exhaust systems with mufflers, so make sure we have a cam. It's not really a muffler, it doesn't make it any quieter, it's just a collector, really. So it's very loud, we can't hear it. Don't have computers to control it. So it's critical that we don't have detonation, so we have the high octane fuels, and which I'm sure have quite a bit of safety margin in them. So in order to get this octane rating up, lead has been the thing of choice since fuels have been around, as far as I can tell. And so what it is, it's tetraethyl lead. So it's tetraethyl lead. Now, if you're old enough, and you remember some of the old-timey gas stations, they had ethyl. That's just what they called the fuel, right? Fill it up with some ethyl. I guess that was just tetraethyl lead. TEL. And it's an octane booster, so it's an octane booster. And this is another one of the things that I can get way off into the weeds on, so I don't want to, but I want to bring out the very important points. Tetraethyl lead, when burned, forms lead oxide. So lead oxide remains solid up to about 900 degrees. And I believe lead oxide is what you see on your aircraft exhaust system, and I have on your belly right after the exhaust, and my cowl flap on the right side. It's just gray, ashy stuff. And like I said, it's made solid up to about 900 degrees, which isn't a problem because once it hits the exhaust is running 1700 degrees at the start, and of course it cools as it goes down, then it's cool by the time it gets to the aircraft, which is why I guess we get those lead oxide, this brownish gray stuff near the end of the exhaust and around the aircraft where the exhaust is. But inside of the engine, we have to consider that the cylinder is not running at 900 degrees. It's running a little bit cooler than that, especially at idle. So we get all this lead in the engine, and we pull back to idle, and it drops below 900, and now we get a bunch of lead oxide forming inside of the combustion chamber. Well, that lead oxide tends to attract itself and attach to the spark plugs. And it is an insulator. So it starts to fill up the spark plug, and it does. It fills up the spark plug to a point where it actually will cover the spark plug, and the spark plug doesn't work anymore. Well, spark plugs tend to foul out, and they don't work. You'll really hear this, and I've talked about this before, especially in four-cylinder Lycomings, because you get one spark plug fouls out, and you do a mag check, well, now you've just lost 75% of your engine. You don't notice it quite so much on a six-cylinder just because of the percentage of when you lose a cylinder, you only lost one, you lost 1/6 of the engine, which is, it runs a little bit better. So what people do in that case, pilots, is they will, if this lead oxide stays solid until 900, They just got to heat things up, burn it off. And so that's why you'll hear people out there running the crap out of their engines on the ground. You know, you'll hear do a mag check and you go, ooh, that sounded bad. Then you'll hear them run it up, just 10 minutes. Then you hear them do another mag check and another 10 minutes. Anyway, so anyway, this tetraethyl lead, not good stuff. So to try and help this out and remove this lead oxide, they add ethylene dibromide, and it changes lead oxide to lead bromide, which is not such a problem. But in order for it to work, it still has to be at a high temperature. So you're still running into this temperature problem. So I guess that's what I kind of want to lead you with. Number one, it's the tetraethyl lead is what we have in the airplanes, and that's the fuel, and that's the thing you should remember. It's tetraethyl lead. And then the second takeaway would be there are other chemicals that they put in this to try and minimize the problems that the lead is creating. And this lead is creating a problem from one end of the engine all the way to the other. It's fouling out the spark plugs. It is contaminating the oil. It is creating sludge. That's where we get all the sludge in the aircraft from. So it's creating all these problems. That's why so many people are so excited about this 100 unleaded fuel. And there's even talk about changing oil change intervals out of 50 to 100 hours. And you know, a great example of that was reading some of the maintenance manuals for the Rotax this past week. And they actually have different columns. It's like, this is your maintenance column if you're going to run your Rotax on 100 low lead. You're going to do everything twice as often. If you run it on car gas like we want you to, you're going to do everything twice as, way longer. So for example, you're running the Rotax with 100 low lead fuel, you're doing an oil change every 50 hours. You commit to using car gas, you go to 100 hours. You want spark plugs? If you more than 30% of the time on 100 low lead, you're changing them out every 200 hours. You run car gas every 400 hours. So you can really start to see that this lead is not good stuff at all.
Why is it taking them so long to get rid of it?
It's money. You know, it's just not a big revenue source.
Meaning they're making more money with the lead because more maintenance is being done.
No. It's
No, there's not a massive quantity for it. There's not a lot of people flying privately.
Yeah.
So why would you constantly change something that already works?
oh yeah. You know, the more I read about this, the more the FAA has had fuel initiatives. They've done all these prizes. They've really tried to push, and the manufacturers going, there's no money in this.
Yeah.
You had something? No, I thought you had. Oh, something. That was good. So, okay. So we got that tetraethyl lead in there. We're putting chemicals in there to try and minimize the damage and the spark plug fouling that this tetraethyl lead is causing. So I don't know. That's not really two. Just the words I was using. That creates lead oxide, which is solid up till 900 degrees. Let's see, spark plug fouling, corrosion. To remove the lead oxide, they use ethylene dibromide. And it changes the lead oxide to lead bromide. I'm not going to ask you to remember any of these things, so if you don't write that, that's fine. Lead bromide, because I don't remember them. Change it to lead, which is not conductive, no spark plug fouling. But for the lead bromide, bromide, there we go, bromide to work, cylinder temps still have to remain high, which is kind of where I want to go with this, is that, so I'll put that cylinder, lead bromide to work, cylinder head, temps must be high. How high? I don't have that number exactly where it's supposed to be. It's above idle, I'll tell you that. And my opinion, the worst engine out there for lead fouling problems is the engine in the Cessna 182s. Lycoming O235. And I say that because it's the only aircraft engine I've ever seen that uses spark plugs where the nose core goes. It has the long nose core that looks more automotive. It's still very massive, but it just doesn't look like any other spark plug used in aviation. And it's because of that. And then on top of that, Lycoming had to come out with a service instruction. Didn't have to. They came out with a service instruction that talks about how you're supposed to run this aircraft on the ground. And what they want you to do is aggressively lean the aircraft engine on the ground. And then prior to shutdown, increase the engine RPM so that you create more heat in the cylinder to burn off the lead bromide that's been created, and then quickly shut down, pull the mixture out. So most, well, I shouldn't say that, I don't know. If you're smart and cautious, as soon as you start your aircraft engine, you're going to lean the hell out of that thing and get it all the way back as lean as you can get it. You can't hurt it at an idle. And that minimizes the lead contamination in a cold engine, which creates all these problems. I'm honestly terrible at it. And the reason why is because I was taught backwards from that. I was actually taught that aircraft engines are excessively rich at idle because the fuel was the main cooling component in the engine at idle. That is just very false. But that was the belief at the time. And so, yeah, it would be just the worst thing you could do is remove the cooling, pull the mixture back. So it's, the way I've always flown, the way I learned. Plus, I flew in an engine with a Stromburg, which will mean a lot to you later. But anyway, there's always a risk of adding the power with the mixture back, so you don't want to do that. But there's also a risk of leaving the landing gear up when you land, and they still make retractable landing gear, so just got to learn it.
So is that an accumulative effect? Meaning you should do it every time, or as long as you do that every 10th or startup, you're good?
Cumulative effect. For every minute you're running it in that rich position, you're dumping lead in the oil that you don't need. And you can't hurt it. Just, you're not in a detonation range, so lean the hell out of it. Yeah, when Phil is great at it. I mean, when we're idling my plane and we're taxiing, man, he just, he doesn't ask, he doesn't tell, he just, yeah, you got that in too far. Thank you. I appreciate it, actually. Let's see. So anyway, yeah, so the takeaway on that is, you gotta, before you shut down the engine after a long period of taxi, if you're worried about your spark plugs fouling, you have to do a run up, get everything hot, burn off the lead bromide that's starting to stick to the spark plugs, burn that off, and then shut down. When you get into doing spark plug maintenance, you're going to see, man, when we clean our spark plugs, it is just packed full of lead. So we pull them off, use a vibrator with teeth in there, and you got to get down in between the porcelain and everything and get all that lead. You got to vibrate it out, tap it out, blast it. By the way, one of my past students who has a gorgeous G1000 Bonanza. What's a G30 something?
I can't afford it, so I don't know.
I know. They're a piston engine, $1 million aircraft. He runs fine wire spark plugs, and he sent me a picture, and a lot of them are broken. And a fine wire plug, I don't buy fine wire plugs because I can't afford them. They're 150 some a piece, something like that. So 150 times 12, that's a lot of money. And half of them were busted. The porcelain was just gone. Now, number one, that's very expensive. Number two, the porcelain went in that engine. And so he sent me a picture of it, and he said, hey, what the hell's going on? I'm like, man, unless you've dropped them, the only thing I've ever heard of was dropping them or detonation doing that. But this guy was a test pilot of some sort for Beach. You always know the people who really know stuff, but they don't tell you anything. It's like, you know a lot, don't you? He's one of those guys, man. You'd have to ask him to tell you, but he didn't offer. So I think he was a test pilot. So what I mentioned, I said, I seriously doubt you're running your engine in a detonation environment. So I did some research, and I found one of the spark plug manufacturers, I think it was Tempest. I forget where I found it, but it was a source that I trusted, said, and this is common in the field, cleaning spark plugs with glass bead. I know. If I went to 10 different shops, probably 8 of them will do it. I hear mechanics say all the time, it's just fine. Tempest, I'll tell you it's Tempest. They have a really good argument in their maintenance manual why you don't use glass bead. It said only use spark plug grit stuff. And their thing is that glass bead it's too small and it gets stuck between the porcelain and the metal. But when you screw it into the cylinder, that glass melts and the glass goes into your engine. What happened to his spark plugs? They said if you use glass bead on especially the fine wire, it expands. And the little glass beads blow up. And there goes your porcelain. So.
You gotta take apart overhaul his whole engine?
No, but he's going to spend $1,000 and some odd dollars in spark plugs from a shop being too lazy to use the right stuff. Because it's really not difficult. I mean, the stuff is so easy to find, and you can go on Amazon and buy it, for God's sakes. You can buy, we have a spark plug cleaner here, but I don't want to bring my spark plugs here and clean them. So I bought my own little spark plug cleaner on Amazon. I think it was $9, and it came with a bag of the spark plug cleaning grit. You know, I'm talking about the old timey, with the sock on it. Works great.
I did not mind to a 2x4.
I did too. Yep. Mine are right to the side of my workbench, and has a little sign that said that way's for blast, that way's for clean. All right. So don't.
How often do you have to clean those spark plugs after each use? Or?
I do mine about every 100 hours. Yeah, definitely not every use. The more you clean them, the more you erode it, and the faster they're gonna. Then it changes the heat rating, which is then going to cause it to foul out again. So you don't want to clean them too much. And fine wire, you don't blast them if you don't need to, but people still do it. All right, so we got lead in fuel, corrosion. Oh, all right. There's this thing about, I don't even have notes for this. I'm just going to tell you. Lead. So when we lost 8087, there was this big thing about, because it was used in all the small Continentals, and you had to get 100 octane valves. And that was like a big deal. I remember it, because I was doing cylinder overhauls. It was, make sure you put the 100 octane valves in it. Don't put the old style in. Okay, 100 octane valves. Well, how come? Well, because it's 100 octane. Well, what's the difference? Some people said the lead was a lubricant. Well, if the lead's a lubricant, then why am I worried about this valve? Why does it need, it's getting lubricated? I got to have something that doesn't like lubrication. What's the deal? I never got a straight answer about that. But kind of recently, I think I figured it out, what's going on. We go way back. When they started to get rid of the lead in car gas, there was a problem, and they said the loss of the lead in car gas was causing valve failures. To some extent, there is some truth to that. There were some, and you guys will correct me if I'm wrong on this, please. Yeah, I'm inviting it. There was what they called valve recession. Well, what that basically is, the valve and the seat were hammering each other. And I've seen this in aviation. You pull out the valve and you can see where it's hitting the seat. It's pounded in there. So instead of having this, this nice little, lip on the valve like that, it was, that's where it's hitting on the seat, then the margin, then like that. That's what I'm drawing there. There's your valve. So radius, and it goes up. See? So this big indent right there. And the source I was reading or watching, it's AvWeb actually, which I think that guy's really bright, was explaining that did happen in automotive, but there's no actual research to prove that that's what caused it, and it didn't happen a lot. So it was just some things. So why there was this big worry about the 100 octane valves, I'm not 100% certain, but there was this statement made that where the valve is supposed to seat, lead would tend to accumulate and cause an abrasive material that would cause this thing to happen that they claimed would happen when you got rid of the 100 low lead. Do you follow what I'm saying? So you go back far enough, they're saying if you get rid of the lead, you're going to have the valve's going to do this. Then we fast forward, they say, but if you add the lead, it's going to do this. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
so
almost like the water in Flint, Michigan, where they changed the chemistry of it, and all the lead that was there got released.
oh, okay, yeah. So, but it was a real thing in aviation. They called it it's the 100 octane valve. This is not the 100 octane valve. It was in the publications. It wasn't like a something that wasn't true. So, now fast forward now we're getting ready to introduce 100 no lead, and what are people saying? You can't do that. We need the lead to lubricate the valves. All right. So my takeaway from what I'm getting from this is me, is number one, there were a lot of soft valves and seats. There was a period of time where especially the small Continentals were made with a bronze or brass looking bronze seat. And I did see valves getting hammered with that stuff. But I've also been told in many different things that when you have something steel and a bronze bushing, like for example your Lycomings that had the rocker shaft that went through bronze bushings, the thing that will wear is not the soft bronze, but the steel. And the reason why is because when you have a soft material, dirt particles embed in it, and it becomes the sandpaper that works on the hardened steel. So I do believe that there was some of these softer valves that were getting dirt particles in them. Those dirt particles would then erode one part or the other. The two would rotate together. But anyway, as far as I can tell, lead does not lubricate the valves, and if it does, it's not going to be the stem, it's going to be the seat down here. And since some people are crying that it actually caused problems before, I don't think that it's an issue, and it's not something I'm worried about. So when somebody asks you, what's your opinion about losing the lead, and as long as the valves are hard enough, it's just either which way isn't going to matter. If the valve and the seat are really soft, I think either which way it's not going to matter. You're going to get that. So if it's soft materials, it's going to wear. If it's hard materials, it's not. I don't think the lead is helping or hurting in either which way. How'd I do?
I've done a lot of repairs on the valve
I know.
in the early 80s, and there was never an excessive amount of wear on the valve itself, but you take those things apart, and it looked like somebody had just taken a cutter on the exhaust valve and cut the seat out. I mean,
Was it on the
removable seats?
It was on the seat, right?
Seats only.
Yeah.
And you could, there was enough for the hydraulic cams at that time. You could take a valve cover off and look at the heights of the valve stem.
Yeah.
And tell if that was the issue.
Yeah, because it was bad. So you would eventually it would hammer the seat so bad that the valve in the seat would no longer line up, and of course now that's where the heat transfer is. You lose the heat transfer, you crack a valve, and there it goes. But they were kind of a bronzish sort of seat at that point, or were they steel?
No, at that time, they were still just cast iron heads, and
Oh, okay.
they were machined right into the cast iron. There wasn't a removable or replaceable seat, unless they were serviced.
Would you look at that? It is lunchtime, dinner time. What do you call it?